defenestration is the act of throwing someone or something out of a window. The term was coined around the time of an incident in Prague Castle in the year 1618. The word comes from the Latin de and fenestra. Likewise, it can also refer to the condition of being thrown out of a window, as in the Defenestration of Ermintrude Inch. While the act of defenestration connotes the forcible or peremptory removal of an adversary, and the term is sometimes used in just that sense, it also suggests breaking the windows in the process. Although defenestrations can be fatal due to the height of the window through which a person is thrown or throws oneself or due to lacerations from broken glass, the act of defenestration need not carry the intent or result of death. Origin of the term originates from two incidents in history, both occurring in Prague. In 1419, 7 town officials were thrown from the town hall, precipitating the Hussite War. In 1618, 2 imperial governors and their secretary were tossed from Prague Castle, sparking the 30 Years' War. These incidents, particularly in 1618, were referred to as the Defenestrations of Prague and gave rise to the term and the concept. The word root derives from Latin fenestra for window. Notable defenestrations in history. Historically, the word defenestration referred to an act of political dissent. Notably, the Defenestrations of Prague in 1419 and 1618 helped to trigger prolonged conflict within Bohemia and beyond. Some Catholics ascribe the survival of those defenestrated at Prague Castle in 1618 to divine intervention. As recorded in the Book of Kings 2 in the Bible, Jezebel was defenestrated at Jezreel by her own servants at the urging of Jehu. In chapter 20 verses 6 through 12 of the Acts of the Apostles in the New Testament, the accidental auto-defenestration of a young man of Troas named Eutychus is recorded. The Apostle Paul was traveling to Jerusalem and had stopped for 7 days in Troas. While preaching in a third-story room late on a Sunday night to the local assembly of Christian believers, the young man Eutychus drifted off to sleep and fell out of the window in which he was sitting. Interestingly, this incident is likely also the only recorded case of raising from death after fatal defenestration, as though Eutychus was taken up dead from the ground below, the Apostle Paul fell upon the body, embraced it, and then presented him alive to those present, whom the Bible indicates were not a little comforted. It has been suggested by several chronicles that King John killed his nephew, Arthur of Brittany, by defenestration from the castle at Rouen, France, in 1203. In 1378, the Crafts and their leader Wouter van der Leyden occupied the Leuven city hall. They took over the Leuven government. Most of the patricians left the city and fled to Aarschot. After negotiations between the parties, they agreed to share the government. The patricians did not accept this easily, as they lost their absolute power. Trying to turn the tide, they had Wouter van der Leyden assassinated in Brussels. The Crafts wanted revenge. They handed over the patrician to a furious crowd. The crowd stormed the city hall and threw the patricians out of the window. At least 15 patricians were killed during this defenestration of Leuven. In 1383, Bishop Dom Martinu was defenestrated by the citizens of Lisbon, having been suspected of conspiring with the enemy when Lisbon was besieged by the Castilians. In 1452, King James II of Scotland murdered William Douglas, 8th Earl of Douglas, with his own hands and threw him out the window at Stirling Castle. On April 26, 1478, after the failure of the Pazzi conspiracy to murder the ruler of Florence, Lorenzo de' Medici, Jacopo de' Pazzi was defenestrated. In 1483, Prague's Old Town Portreeve and the bodies of 7 murdered New Town aldermen were defenestrated. On May 16, 1562, Adam Khan, Akbar's general and foster brother, was defenestrated twice for murdering a rival general, Ataga Khan, who had been recently promoted by Akbar. Akbar was woken up in the tumult after the murder. He struck Adam Khan down personally with his fist and immediately ordered his defenestration by royal order. The first time, his legs were broken as a result of the 12-meter fall from the ramparts of Agra fort, but he remained alive. Akbar, in a rare act of cruelty probably exacerbated by his anger at the loss of his favorite general, ordered his defenestration a second time, killing him. Adam Khan had wrongly counted on the influence of his mother and Akbar's wet nurse, Mayo Manga, to save him, as she was almost an unofficial regent in the days of Akbar's youth. Akbar personally informed Mayo Manga of her son's death, to which she famously commented, "You have done well." She died 40 days later of acute depression. In 1572, French King Charles IX's friend, the Huguenot leader Gaspard de Coligny, was killed in accordance with the wishes of Charles' mother, Catherine de' Medici. Charles had allegedly said, "Then kill them all, that no man be left to reproach me." Thousands of Huguenots were killed in the Street of Bartholomew's Day massacre after soldiers attacked Coligny in his house, stabbed him, and threw him out the window. On the morning of December 1, 1640, in Lisbon, a group of supporters of the Duke of Braganza party found Miguel de Vasconcelos, the hated Portuguese Secretary of State of the Habsburg Philippa III, hidden in a closet, killed him and defenestrated him. His corpse was left to the public outrage. In December 1840, Abraham Lincoln and a couple of other Illinois legislators jumped out of a window in a belated political maneuver designed to prevent a quorum on a vote to resume specie payment that endangered the reserves of the Illinois State Bank. On June 27, 1844, an armed mob with blackened faces stormed Carthage jail, where Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith were being held. Hiram, who was trying to secure the door, was killed instantly with a shot to the face. Smith fired a pepper-box pistol, then sprang for the window. He was shot multiple times before falling out the window, crying, "Oh Lord my God!" He died shortly after hitting the ground, but was shot several times more before the mob dispersed. The revolutions of 1848 led to unrest in the German states. When an agitated crowd forced their way into the town hall in Cologne on March 3, two city councillors panicked and jumped out of the window. One of them broke both his legs. The event went down in the Cite unregistered trademark's history as the Cologne Defenestration. During the Polish January 1863 uprising, Russian troops threw Frau copyright Rick Chopin's piano out of a second-story apartment. The incident was famously memorialized in Polish poet Cyprian Norwood's poem, Chopin's Piano. The composer had left Warsaw and Poland forever shortly before the outbreak of the November 1830 uprising. On June 11, 1903, a group of Serbian army officers murdered and defenestrated King Alexander and Queen Driga. In 1911, during the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, numerous fatalities were people who leapt or fell out of windows to their death. In 1922, Italian politician and writer Gabriele D'Annunzio was temporarily crippled after being pushed out a window by an unknown assailant. On February 4, 1946, Serbian general and politician Milan Nedia died in a fall from the window of a prison where he was awaiting trial for treason for supporting the Nazi occupation of Yugoslavia. Newspapers reported it to be a suicide. On March 10, 1948, the Czechoslovakian Minister of Foreign Affairs Jan Masaryk was found dead, in his pajamas, in the courtyard of the Foreign Ministry below his bathroom window. The initial investigation stated that he committed suicide by jumping out of the window, although some believe that he was murdered by the ascendant communists. A 2004 police investigation into his death concluded that, contrary to the initial ruling, he did not commit suicide, but was defenestrated, most likely by Czechoslovak communists and their Soviet NKVD advisors for opposing the February 1948 communist putsch. On November 28, 1953, the U.S. biological warfare specialist Frank Olson fell through a window in what may have been an assassination. On April 15, 1966, two alleged suspects in the so-called bathroom coup in Sri Lanka, Corporal Tilekawardhan and L.V. Podiapahami, were said by the Criminal Investigations Department to have jumped to their deaths from the fourth floor of the CID building in the fort. At the inquest, following receipt of new evidence, the magistrate altered the verdict of suicide to one of culpable homicide. The remainder of the suspects were acquitted. In 1968, the son of China's future paramount leader Deng Xiaoping, Deng Pufang, was thrown from a window by Red Guards during the Cultural Revolution. Shortly before midnight on December 15, 1969, the Italian anarchist Giuseppe Pinelli was seen falling to his death from a fourth-floor window of the Milan police station. In 1977, as a result of political backlash against his album Zombie, Felacute's mother was thrown from a window during a military raid on his compound, the Kalakuta Republic, by 1,000 Nigerian soldiers. The injuries sustained from the fall led to her death days later. In addition, the commanding officer defecated on her head, while the soldiers burned down the compound, destroying his musical equipment, studio and master tapes, and jailing him for being a subversive. In 1993, Toronto lawyer Gary Hoy fell to his death after attempting to demonstrate the strength of his office tower's windows. On November 4, 1995, the French philosopher Gilles Deleuze committed suicide by throwing himself from his apartment window. On October 26, 1997, NBA player Charles Barkley was arrested for hurling a bar patron through a plate glass window after the man tossed a glass of ice at him. The 2000 Ramallah lynching included throwing the body of either Vadim Nerzitz or Yossi Avrahami out of a second-floor window, after those two Israeli soldiers had been lynched. On September 11, 2001, the September 11 attacks caused over 200 people to jump or fall from windows, to die by falling rather than from the fires inside the World Trade Center buildings. Some of the falls were broadcast on the news. On March 2, 2007, Russian investigative journalist Ivan Safronov, who was researching the Kremlin's cover-arms deals, fell to his death from a fifth-floor window. Friends and colleagues discount suicide as a reason, and an investigation was opened looking into possible incitement to suicide. In 2007 in Gaza, gunmen allegedly affiliated with Hamas killed a Fatah supporter by defenestration, an act repeated the next day when a Hamas supporter was defenestrated by alleged supporters of Fatah. In 2009, the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission held several witnesses overnight for questioning. One witness, Teo Beng Hock, was found dead on the roof of an adjacent building. Public outrage led to the formation of a Royal Commission of Inquiry which is ongoing. Self-defenestration. Self-defenestration is the act of jumping, propelling oneself, or causing oneself to fall, out of a window. This phenomenon played a notable role in such events as the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire of 1911, the 9/11 terror attacks on the World Trade Center, and other disasters. In December 1840, Abraham Lincoln and 4 other Illinois legislators jumped out of a window in a political maneuver designed to prevent a quorum on a vote that would have eliminated the Illinois State Bank. Self-defenestration is also a method of suicide. In the United States, self-defenestration is among the least common methods of committing suicide. In Hong Kong, jumping is the most common method of committing suicide, accounting for 52.1% of all reported suicide cases in 2006, and similar rates for the years prior to that. The Center for Suicide Research and Prevention of the University of Hong Kong believes that it may be due to the abundance of easily accessible high-rise buildings in Hong Kong. Recent notables choosing this method of departure are actor Leslie Chung and magistrate Michael C. Jenkins. Population density is such that it is not uncommon for the defenestratee to kill or maim a passerby upon arrival at the pavement below. There is an urban legend in the U.S. that many Wall Street investors auto-defenestrated during the 1929 stock market crash. In literature, in his poem Defenestration, R.P. Lister wrote with amusement over the creation of so exalted a word for so basic a concept. The poem narrates the thoughts of a philosopher undergoing defenestration. As he falls, the philosopher considers why there should be a particular word for the experience, when many equally simple concepts don't have specific names. In an evidently ironic commentary on the word, Lister has the philosopher summarize his thoughts with, "I concluded that the incidence of logadiddly was purely adventitious." The play Accidental Death of an Anarchist by Dario Fo was inspired by the death of Giuseppe Pinelli while being held by the Milan police. In Jennifer Painter's Mary Bennet, a young Mary, enraged by George Rover's insulting mutterings about her poor vision, and his spying on her sister Elizabeth and Mr. Coates kissing, she was tempted to push him from the open schoolroom window of Netherfield. There is a range of hacker witticisms referring to defenestration. For example, The term is sometimes used humorously among GNU Linux users to describe the act of removing Microsoft Windows from a computer. In an episode of the TV series Mystery Science Theater 3000, while watching The Screaming Skull, Tom Servo quips, "Can I interest you in some defenestration?" as the main character's husband leads her towards a window. On the television series 24, Live Another Day, Jack Bauer defenestrates Margot Al-Harazi as an act of retribution for the day's terrorist attacks. References